Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to talk how to beat the deck I'm currently grinding with, which is red-black midrange. Now, this deck might not necessarily be the boogeyman that it used to be in the format, but it is still very much around, and it's really important to be able to understand how to beat these red-black midrange decks. And by and large, beat pretty much most midrange decks, because the red-black midrange deck is definitely like a pretty classic midrange deck if you ignore the advantage that they are able to get from Fable and Shieldred. And really most midrange decks run cards like that anyway that just have a lot of value. So what is this red-black midrange deck trying to do? Like every midrange deck, they are looking to 1-for-1 with their opponent, to cast removal spells, to cast cards like Thoughtseize, to punish mulligans, to take important cards out of their opponent's hand and make their hand not functional with things like Thoughtseize, to try to make sure that they kill the important creatures and so that their creatures can get through, and playing creatures that are just a little bit better than they are in surface level. Things like Bloodtithe Harvester that removes their creatures, or Bonecrusher Giant that can be a removal spell early and then a creature later on, or Shieldred that can just close out the game extremely quickly and gain you a bunch of life. And all of this is on the back of Fable of the Mirror Breaker, probably one of the better midrange cards ever printed. That is 3 cards in 1, basically. It's a huge way that they can get ahead of it by having card selection and having 2 creatures out of 1 card. So how do you beat that? How do you beat a deck that is built to just play really, really good fair magic? Now, one of the ways is to play their game, to out 1-for-1 them, or to out card them. Play in things like Reckoner Bankbuster, or Planeswalkers that let you see more cards, or really anything that gives you more of a card advantage than your opponent's 1-for-1s, can make the red-black deck's 1-for-1s kind of not matter because you'll have 2 cards to replace every one that they answer. The second huge way that you can work to beat the red-black midrange deck is blanking their removal. So the major way that they're able to 1-for-1 with you is by removing your creatures. And you can blank their removal in a few different ways. Maybe the obvious way is by not playing creatures. So things like the blue-white control deck has a giant advantage in game 1 against a lot of decks, but specifically against the red-black midrange deck, because it means that pretty much all of their removal just doesn't do anything anymore, and they have to discard it to Fable the Mirror Breaker at best. So if you blank their removal, you blank 15 to 20% of the active non-land cards in their deck. Now, the other more realistic way to blank their removal is play creatures that they don't want to kill. Creatures that do something when they die, or creatures that come back later on. The creatures I'm kind of thinking about are like mono green, right? Old Growth Troll makes them ramp even faster, and they get to keep the devotion when it dies. Cavalier of Thorns gets to get something from the graveyard and put it on top of their library. Things that do something when they die are very, very powerful. Or things that are not really worth it to kill, but are still really good. Like in Red-Black Sack, things like Unlucky Witness or Cauldron Familiar. They really, really don't want to be using removal spells on those creatures, but then if they don't use removal spells, then they get nickeled and dimed out. And so things like that blanks red-black's removal. It makes 15 to 20% of their deck just do nothing. So then the other angle of the red-black deck is Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize does a lot. Like I mentioned earlier, Thoughtseize really punishes mulligans. It's able to take essential cards out of your hand so that your hand doesn't really function as well. And if we're not talking about Fable the Mirror Breaker, Thoughtseize is maybe the most important card in red-black midrange. So how do you make Thoughtseize bad? Now, there are a lot of cute ways into making Thoughtseize bad, but I think the best way to make Thoughtseize bad is playing redundant cards in your deck. Not relying on a single card to bring your entire strategy together, because guess what? That is going to be Thoughtseize. Running cards that do similar things, right? Things like multiple removal spells or multiple aggressive creatures, instead of that really crazy combo deck that needs this one card to function. Oops, it got Thoughtseize, it's gone. That sounds really simple, but a lot of players, especially people that like are brewing cool decks, which I love brewing, it's super cool, don't really realize that they just die to Thoughtseize. And then beyond that, look for 2-for-1s. Look for ways that you can get 2 cards for every one of their 1 card. Things like looking for a double block on your attacking creature, and then you get to remove one of their creatures, and then combat damage kills 1 creature, and so you trade 1 removal spell for 2 of their creatures. It's awesome. That's total blowouts against midrange decks. Even board wipes like Supreme Verdict. If you Supreme Verdict away 2 or 3 cards from the red-black midrange deck, that can be back-breaking and totally devastating for them. Because again, they're looking to 1-for-1, eventually have better card selection, and eventually have more cards, and eventually kill you. And if you're the deck doing that, you're the deck 2-for-1ing your opponent. I don't care if the red-black midrange deck is 1-for-1ing me. But those are just some simple ways that you can work to beat red-black midrange, and really midrange at large. If you like this video, like these really quick synopsis of these strategies and nuances, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.